What's up guys, my name is Mike and I'm the Weird Pigeon of Weird Pigeon Productions, and Andor is literally just around the corner. It's only a few days away from the first 3 episodes releasing on the 21st, and I just want to make a little video kind of talking about what we already know about the show leading into it. I'll be discussing some of the behind the scenes of its creation, the structure of the show, the setting, the timeline, and some of the key characters. That way, when you go to watch the show initially, you have a good idea of who everyone is and what's kind of happening. So guys, this show is going to be 2 seasons long. The first season, of course, is coming out in just a few days, and that first season is going to be 12 episodes. The second season is going to be 12 episodes as well. And what's interesting about the show is it's going to be told in 3 episode arcs. So the first 3 episodes, which are releasing on the 21st all at once, will be one sort of self-contained story. Then the next 3 episodes, which will be released one at a time, after that will also be their own self-contained stories. I'm sure all these stories will build on each other. They'll contain a lot of the same characters, but they're going to be somewhat separate. And the first season is going to span 1 entire year of time in the Star Wars universe. It's set roughly 14 years after Revenge of the Sith, and about 5 years before A New Hope, and of course Rogue One. Now what about the story of this show? Well, it's mostly written and directed by Tony Gilroy. If you don't know who this guy is, he did a lot of the Bourne movies, and really if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have the Rogue One movie that we have today. When Gareth Edwards, the director for Rogue One, showed the movie to the Disney executives and the people over at Lucasfilm, they weren't much of a fan of the movie. They didn't really like it. And they hired Tony Gilroy to come in, rewrite the story, and reshoot massive portions of this movie, including completely changing and redoing the ending. Because of his heavy involvement and contribution to Rogue One, it just makes sense to include him in this literal prequel to Rogue One. On top of that, Tony Gilroy said he wanted to make a different sort of Star Wars. Going into this, he wasn't too interested in creating a big space opera saga containing what he considered like the royal family, the Skywalkers. He wanted to make a show about the everyday lives of the people of the Star Wars universe and how war has impacted them. A lot of people have described this show as being more adult and complex than your average Star Wars story. It's going to be grittier, darker, but also at the same time more human and I guess you could say down to earth, even though it's the Star Wars galaxy. And one thing Tony Gilroy has made sure that people understand about this show is that even the villains will be humanized and you'll kind of see where they're coming from. After reading up on all of this, I've only felt more excited for this show, and it's really exciting to be getting some perspectives we really haven't gotten before. Now, who are some of the key characters in this show? Well, of course, the main character is going to be Cassian Andor, who is one of the main characters in Rogue One. In Rogue One, he is a die-hard rebel. He is willing to sacrifice and does sacrifice everything for the rebellion and what it stands for. But when this show begins, we're going to be seeing a very different Cassian Andor. He's a refugee and a thief, and he has no interest in joining the rebellion or fighting for something bigger than himself. Tony Gilroy has made sure in interviews to let us all know that these characters will change quite a bit with the passing of time, especially Andor. Another main character is Mon Mothma. She is a senator in the Imperial Senate. During the Republic, she was a senator for her planet Chandrila. But by the time of the original trilogy in Rogue One, she is one of the founders of the rebellion and one of its key leading members. Besides seeing her in Rogue One, we also see her in Return of the Jedi. When we see her in this show, she is still a senator in the Imperial Senate, but just like Andor, she's also very reluctant to openly fight against the Empire. Next, we have a brand new character called Luthen Rael. It looks like he is also possibly an Imperial senator. He's definitely high up in the Imperial structure, and he seems to be the main driving force for getting people to join the rebellion, to openly fight against the Empire. I'm incredibly excited to see who this character is all about and where he'll end up, because we don't see him in Rogue One. Next up, we have Saw Gerrera, and it was no surprise to me that this guy was going to be in this show because he's been in just about everything else besides the main Star Wars movies. We first saw his character in the Clone Wars animated TV show. He made his live-action debut in Rogue One. Since then, we've seen him in Rebels, we've seen him in Jedi Fallen Order, we've seen him in Bad Batch, and it only made sense that we'd also see him again in Andor because it is a prequel to Rogue One. However, if you don't know who this character is, essentially he is a rebel, he's a freedom fighter, but he goes about fighting the Empire very differently when compared to the rest of the rebellion. Even though he's fighting for the right cause, the way that he fights is all wrong. To him, the ends 100% justify the means. He is not in any way a good guy. He just is fighting the bad guys. And by the time of Rogue One, his willingness to disregard innocent lives and do whatever he can to destroy the Empire actually gets him kicked out of the rebellion. And I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see that in this show. Probably the character I'm most interested in seeing more about is this guy named Syril Karn. We don't know too much about his character. I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but it looks like he's part of some kind of organization that isn't directly affiliated with the Empire, but is definitely Imperial in some kind of way. I kind of wonder if he is maybe some kind of form of the corporate sector authority. There's a lot of mystery surrounding his character. We don't know too much about him at all or the organization he works for, but what we do know is that he's obsessed with finding Cassian Andor, and sometime earlier on in his career, and possibly early on in the show, we'll see that he makes a massive mistake, which leaves him in a lower position than he once was. And he is hungry to do something big and to move back up to where he used to be in this organization. And from what interviews we've had so far, it looks like his character is going to be working with this next character on our list, Dedra Meero. And she is an ISB agent, which stands for Imperial Security Bureau. They're kind of like the SS of the Empire, and her main goal is to root out these rebels who are on the planet Ferrix. Unlike Syril, she is starting out at the bottom of the totem pole and trying to work her way up. She's very frustrated with her superiors who don't seem to care about the rebel threat. They think it's nothing. But to her, this could end up being a huge issue for the Empire, like we eventually see it become. She's ambitious and definitely is on the hunt for Andor and his rebel friends. Another character from the trailer is a woman named Maarva. We don't know hardly anything about her besides the fact that she is possibly Andor's adopted mother. And then last but not least, we have another character called Bix Caleen. And she is going to be part of the rebellion or rebel cell or freedom fighters on the planet Ferrix that Andor will come in contact with. I wouldn't be surprised if she is a pretty big driving force in getting Andor to officially join the rebellion. And although that is all the main characters that we know of so far leading up to Andor, I do want to make one more honorable mention, and that is K2SO. He will not be in this first season of Andor. When the show was first written and before Tony Gilroy was brought on board, he was going to be a main portion of the show from the very beginning, but Tony Gilroy decided it'd be better to establish Andor's character and then introduce him later on in season 2. So even though K2SO will not be in this season, you can expect to see him in the future. And guys, that is pretty much everything we know about Cassian Andor so far. Of course, with Lucasfilm, they don't really let anything leak out these days, so I don't have too much information, but everything I've learned about this show so far has only made me more excited for it. When I first heard about Andor being a thing, I was like, that sounds interesting, but I'd rather see something like The Mandalorian or Kenobi. But the closer we've gotten to the release date, the more excited I have been. And I think this show is probably the show I've been most excited for so far this year. This will also be the longest live-action Star Wars show we've gotten so far. It's 12 episodes, and each episode seems like it's going to be around 45 to 50 minutes long. So guys, what do you think of Andor? Are you really excited for it? Did you learn something new in this video? Or is there something I might have missed? I'd love to hear from y'all. I love reading your comments. Of course, I will be covering Andor pretty heavily when it comes out. So if you want to know more about this show and want to hear my thoughts and opinions on it, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.